Yay! This is the last show for 2021 with my beautiful friend, Dr. Betsy Greenleaf. We're going to talk about brain, gut, pelvis axis. Be ready. We're going to be there soon. It's so great to close this year with Dr. Betsy. We will have another promotion show, but it's not Green Healing Show. This is the last Green Healing Show for 2021. So welcome to my show, Betsy.
Thank you so much for having me here. This is awesome. I'm so excited to be talking with you today.
Yeah, me too. Actually, we had another show together. That was hair show. And I was really excited. We had great conversation about the fertility. This time we're going to talk about brain, gut, pelvis axis. Actually, Betsy has lots of talents and lots of certification, lots of licenses. She's a premier women's health expert, best-selling author, entrepreneur, and she has a long list. I couldn't bring it here. So I'm going to ask her to introduce herself for us.
Sure. I'm Dr. Betsy Greenleaf. I'm the first board-certified female urogynecologist in the United States. And so sometimes people ask, what is a urogynecologist? And when I came home and told my mom that I was going to be studying it, she thought it was like a fancy gynecology because she thought it was like European, like Euro Disney. But the word uro actually means like urology, having to do with the pelvic health, like bladder. And so combines both bladder health, pelvic health, and gynecology. So talking about reproductive health.
Reproductive health. But what is your medical license?
So I'm an osteopathic physician.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Great. So, Betsy, tell me about yourself. I know you have a great book. I can't wait to talk about it first. And then we're going to go back to our topic, the relationship between brain, gut, and pelvis axis.
Yeah, so I have a best-selling author with a bunch of other great authors. We all went and did a compilation book. It's called You're Made to Be Unstoppable. And it was really great because it's all different stories about where something came up in our lives and something was very difficult and how we overcame it. So in particular, I unfortunately, when I came out in a fellowship, I did all my training. I had this ideal view of what medicine was going to be like. And I walked into a hospital this was in like 2006. But you would have thought you were in the 1950s. It was very old school, very like old boys club. And so to walk in as a female surgeon, I was not readily accepted into their culture. And they made it very, very difficult for me to be there. I got comments like women were ruining medicine and that we were wanting too much because we wanted to have a career and a family, and that women didn't make good surgeons because we didn't have the eye-hand coordination. You really thought you were like stuck in the 1950s, and this was like 2006, 2007. But the story goes into like depths of all the things that I endured and how I basically overcame being treated that way.
So tell me about the relationship between brain, gut, and pelvis. I know for sure for the gut and brain because I'm a fertility coach as well. And as a functional medicine perspective, we always take care of gut because it's a really important part in your body. And if it's not functioning very well, your diet is not working, whatever you are eating is not going to give you the same nutrition that you supposed to have. So tell me about it and why are you so interested about this connection?
Yeah, so it's so interesting because the body is so interconnected. That's what my background as an osteopathic physician. We tend to look at the body as a whole and then try to figure out like what's going on. So it's been really interesting to see over the years, especially with functional medicine, them taking such an approach with gut health and it affecting all other systems in the body and inflammation. I mean, we know that like 90% of your 90 to 95% of your serotonin, your happy hormone, is made in your gut. So if your gut is off from eating, inflammatory foods or being under a lot of stress, that you may be more likely to have issues with anxiety and depression. We know that around 80% of your immune system is made in your gut. So if your gut is off, you're going to be more susceptible to getting recurrent colds, recurrent infections. So there's been this strong movement towards looking at gut-brain connection. And actually, I saw something really fascinating the other day. There was like 90% of your nerves, so your nerve pathways from your gut go through the vagus nerve. Like 90% of the vagus nerve is directly gut to brain connection, which is fascinating. But what scientists are looking at now is this idea of the vagina gut brain connection. And so also with the vagus nerve. And so one of the things that they found is specifically, we know that the body has different areas with microbiomes. So microbiomes are small bacteria and organisms that live in that small environment. So your mouth microbiome is different than your gut microbiome. That's different than your vaginal microbiome. And what they've been able to connect this with now is that if the microbiome in the vagina is off, like if we've lost our healthy bacteria, now there's more bad bacteria, there's more yeast, that there is this feedback loop through the vagina, potentially through the vagus nerve. This is what they're trying to prove right now, to the brain that says, hey, this isn't an ideal time to be reproducing. And so the brain responds by decreasing sex drive and actually affecting fertility. So they're really looking at like, oh my God, there is such a big interconnection between what's going on in the vagina and how our brain reacts to it and how it can affect sex drive. I mean, it's been amazing for them to connect sex drive to microbes being off in the vagina. So
How is your internet connection right now?
So yeah, right now it actually looks good, but for a minute I couldn't hear you.
Yeah, because you have some delays when you talk, so that's why I'm asking.
Yeah.
Yeah. Uh, okay. Tell me about pelvis axis. What is this, and what is it doing with the connection between brain, gut, and pelvis?
So combination with that effect on sex drive and fertility, we also see, especially with the gut, that things that we're eating can actually cause problems in the pelvis. So many people experience what's called overactive bladder. That's a condition that can start as young as in your 20s, but by time we reach our 70s, there's more people walking around with an overactive bladder than has the common cold. So this is that sudden, like, I gotta pee, like, where's the bathroom? Like, make way, I gotta go, or even difficulty holding it in and leaking. And they've been able to connect that through irritation in the gut to certain foods. So foods that tend to irritate the bladder can be caffeine, chocolate, uh, alcohol, tomatoes, and citrus fruits. So very acidic foods. So unfortunately, if you're somebody who's prone to this, going out for a good Italian meal may not be very comfortable because you may be running to the bathroom all the time. But there's things that can be done for it, whether that may be adjusting the diet and avoiding those foods, or even adding things in that to just kind of deal with that pH, kind of neutralize the acidity of those foods to help with those symptoms. And it's tough because, especially with those symptoms, people tend to purposely dehydrate themselves because they think, oh, if I stop drinking fluids, then maybe I won't go to the bathroom all the time. But in fact, that has an opposite effect on the body. It'll make the urine more concentrated. And as the urine is more concentrated, it actually becomes more irritating to the lining of the bladder. So it may be counterintuitive, but the more water you drink, the actual less pelvic symptoms you tend to have.
That's so interesting. You talk about tomato, and I experienced it myself because I'm not a fan of tomato, but I eat it. I eat it with my salad. So when I had this fertility issue going on, I went to acupuncture, and he recommended me to remove it. And I said, I will add tomato paste to most of my food. And he said, no, you have to remove it, or at least you have to decrease the amount of you consuming. And it really helped. It really helped. I know that it helped. And another point, I used to eat a lot of mangoes. And he said, no. I guess mango has the same effect, right? Same
Yeah.
effect.
And I'm thinking specifically with like tomatoes and peppers and eggplant, those are in your nightshade family. And we know that in certain individuals, they can be very inflammatory. So that may be something just to stay away from in general, because we've seen people who have joint pains, worsening of arthritis. From the pelvic standpoint, they get worsening of pelvic pain syndromes when they eat some of these inflammatory foods.
Yes. All right, give us some recommendation. Let's see, somebody come with you with a pelvic pain. First, you had all the labs, everything like a conventional labs that is available there. What do you recommend to him or her when you see this problem?
One of the first things we start with is just starting with the basics before we get into it any further. I mean, we know that any stress in the body can not only affect the gut, leading to leaky gut, but can also cause inflammation and decreased healing. So, the basics, which we always forget about, is getting enough sleep. So, trying to work on getting at least 8 hours of sleep. And now I know a lot of people can't go from like sleeping 5, 6 hours, and then all of a sudden 8. It's not going to work. But I tell people, back it off 15 minutes each day until you get to the point where you're doing 8 hours of sleep, because that's very healing. It's also going to affect a lot hormone production, which will add to healing and decrease inflammation. Getting enough fluids. I've looked at research that says 75 to 85% of Americans are chronically dehydrated. And we talked before that if you're dehydrated, that can really concentrate the urine and make it more irritating to the pelvis. Then also eating whole foods. I always tell people things that you would naturally find in the environment, whether that's, your whole food protein sources, whether it's from animals or if we're using it from fruits and vegetables. But I always tell people Twinkies don't grow on trees. So we want to stay away from processed foods. We want to stay away from sugar. Other things that we typically think of as inflammatory is gluten-containing products with wheat or dairy. So those can be very irritating. Also, adding more fermented foods into the diet, because as humans in cave people times, there weren't refrigerators. So we were really eating foods that had a lot more natural bacteria, and our body needs that natural bacteria to protect us. We're not alone. We're working in conjunction with the bacteria on our body. So we need more of those healthy fermented foods in our gut. And that, if the gut is populated with healthy bacteria, the vagina for women will be populated. For men, you'll have better pelvic floor function, sexual function with that. So we want to make sure we're getting fermented foods. Sometimes people ask me, like, what are fermented foods? Those are your, like, sauerkraut, which is, I would tell, don't get the ones in the can. Get the ones that are usually refrigerated in the supermarket. If you're adventurous, it's pretty easy to make at home. We did a lot of that during the quarantine. Yogurts. Now, yogurts, I have a mixed feelings about yogurt because it is dairy. But if you can tolerate dairy, the bacteria in the yogurt will naturally break down down those milk sugars. So it's not as bad as drinking like a glass of milk. It's not going to be as inflammatory. Kimchi. There's lots of options with kombucha, which is fermented tea, and I love that. And you can find that in the store. I mean, you can make it your own, but you can also find that in the store. So I like people to at least get one type of fermented food per day. But you can't start, we don't start off perfect. You might practice. Maybe you're just doing it once a week, and then you're going up to twice a week, and then you keep adding it until you get it every day. Sometimes even just taking probiotics. There's a lot of different options for probiotics, so that if you don't like the taste of fermented foods, you're still getting some healthy bacteria into your system. With that, we're looking at doing the basics and decreasing stress. Well, that's a big one. We know that a lot of the research shows that meditation can not only heal, but when it comes to patients with pelvic pain, if they're in chronic pelvic pain, what happens over time is they will actually develop physical changes in their brain structure. And these physical changes in their brain structure, and this is actually not even pelvic pain, this is any chronic pain syndrome. Those changes in the brain will actually make a person more susceptible to anxiety and depression. There have been a number of studies where they didn't put people on medicine, they didn't change their diets. All they did was, there was one study, they put someone through 8 weeks of meditation, and they came back and re-scanned their brain, and they actually showed that you can reverse those brain changes, those physical changes in the brain, and those patients were reporting improved mood. They repeated that study using yoga. They repeated that study using cognitive behavioral therapy, acupuncture. They've repeated those studies, and all those have shown that those chronic changes that actually happen in the brain can be reversed. So incorporating some kind of stress reduction, sometimes people are like, I don't know how to meditate. Well, maybe it's just sitting quietly. Maybe it's taking a deep breath. Maybe it's just getting a hobby, something. So distraction therapy.
I think that's the most needed for people with kids, especially when you have 3-year-old kid, 2-year-old kid staying at home all the time during this COVID.
Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely.
It's really needed. Betsy, I have a question for you.
Sure.
Whole wheat, whole wheat breads. I know it's good for the body, and we have to replace it, replace the white flour with whole wheat. But what's the does it beneficial for? Is it beneficial for stomach? Because I feel it's very heavy for digestion. What do we have to do?
So, it's funny because as much as I say, cut out all the gluten products, I personally love bread. But I try to find it. We know that the highly processed breads, like the white bread, tends to be a lot more inflammatory. We know that some people just really have a tendency to be sensitive to gluten, which is a protein in the wheat product. But it's also kind of the way our wheat has been grown over the years. And so wheat 100 years ago was more nutritious than what we have now. You can find products now that contain something called einkorn wheat, and einkorn wheat is a lot more nutritious than your regular run-of-the-mill wheat. I also like, for gut health, I like sourdough bread, because when you make sourdough bread, you're actually fermenting some of the bread so that it's breaking it down. You get that natural process. That tends to be better on the gut. Also sprouted wheats. Or sprouted grain breads, because what happens when you take wheat or rye or any of these grains, when you sprout them, the way a seed naturally works is there's sugars within the seed that help feed that growing plant. So when you sprout it, it actually decreases the sugar load of those grains. And there's I just think on the top of my head, Ezekiel brand, which you can find usually in your freezer section of your supermarkets. They make really good sprouted wheat products. Because you got to watch out, because sometimes you go, okay, well, I'm going to be healthy and I'm going to go eat gluten-free bread. Well, sometimes the gluten-free breads are made out of corn. And corn tends to be very inflammatory. Another thing is our corn in the United States has also been so overly bred that it's not as nutritious as it used to be. So I rather somebody, if given the choice, I'd rather you eat something gluten containing that's a whole wheat or a sprouted wheat or something like a sourdough than eat something that's made out of corn.
You know what I realized? Old days, everything was so natural. My parents and my family and me, including me, eat everything. We ate everything. And and I'm not saying never, but usually I never get sick. But here in these days, I guess everything is more processed. You can trust the food. And the problem with this, I guess, our immune system is weak. So
Yeah.
whatever we eat, we can't digest it properly, or whatever we eat is not as nutritious that it used to be many years ago.
Yeah.
Because I remember I used to eat ice cream, cake, everything, and never afraid of eating those. And my body weight was okay. But right now, I try to avoid everything sugary on everything like cake. So I don't enjoy it. Even if I look at it, I say, oh, let's have it. And I say, no, I'm going to have some inflammation. So just avoid it. Unfortunately, this is these days life for processed food. Every day we go, everything is more luxurious, but it's more processed.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
part of it is, something with the processed food is everybody's lives are so busy. They want something quick and easy to grab, and so a lot of things are processed because of ease or even shelf life. We're seeing too. I mean, even the foods that were natural. We have, you go to the supermarket and there's fruits and vegetables, but we don't necessarily know unless they're organic how they were grown. What kind of chemicals were they being exposed to as fertilizers? What chemicals were they being exposed to as insecticides are now in that fruit? No matter how much you wash it, those toxins can get into those fruit and vegetable. Now you eat it, and now there's a problem. I even think like fish are swimming in the ocean, like that should be healthy. But we now know that because of just toxins, that the fish are being exposed to mercury, and that's building up in their tissue. And so if you eat fish, like I love fish, I could eat sushi every single day. But if I ate sushi every single day, now I'm exposing myself to mercury poisoning. And I've seen that in my practice where people with very high fish diets have high levels of mercury because the fish have the mercury in their tissue because they've just been exposed through the environment. So it's kind of sad that we are where we are with our food, with the state of our food. I think though the awareness that we're kind of moving in a better direction. I know that organic foods can be very expensive. I tell people to always look at the environmental working group.org's website. So that's the EWG, make sure I got those letters right, .org. They have a list called the Dirty Dozen. So if you have to buy something that's not organic, at least try to stay away from the Dirty Dozen. Off the top of my head, strawberries is on that list. So strawberries are very high in toxins unless you buy them in organic. Spinach was on that list. I think peaches is on that list. So it's the 12 foods that tend to have the highest amount of toxins in it. So if you can buy those buy them organic. A good friend of mine, Terry Walls, so I always give her credit for this. She said something that I thought was brilliant, is that where she's located, she has people that are living on food stamps eating organic. And I'm like, how are you doing that? Organic foods are so expensive. She said, especially during the summer months, she encourages people to go to farmers markets, especially at the end of the day, because those farmers don't want to have to take that food back with them. So you just offer the farmer, like, hey, how much do you want for me to take this stuff off your hands? And you can tend to get it much cheaper.
Wow, interesting. Yes, I used to go to farmers markets every summer as well because it's fun. It's fun to like some farms here in Ontario. They have a lot of fun stuff for kids as well. So we go there, we pick our fruits and come back home.
And more and more people are starting to grow their own fruits and vegetables, which is actually really fun, especially to do with kids. Now, I have to say, I try my garden every year, and thank God my family does not have to like count on me to survive, because I do not have a green thumb. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. I mean, I get some things out of my garden, but I just can't grow it the way I want to. But the type, especially if you do seeds, you can get such fun varieties of fruits and vegetables that you would never even see in a store because they're not commercially produced. So usually I tell people start looking in like January, February for shopping for seeds. Otherwise, you can buy them from garden stores, already grown. I tend to do better with them. They've already been started for me, and I just stick them in the ground. So
Okay, Betsy, thank you so much for being here. I just see before we go, I just see your website here, greenleafbewell.com and pelvicfloorstore.com. What
yeah.
are these websites, and what is the purpose of having these two?
So the Greenleaf Be Well is my practice that's in New Jersey, and the Pelvic Floor Store is my website with all pelvic health products, because I found that patients were having a difficult time finding reliable products. And unfortunately, especially when it comes to supplements, there's been a number of articles over the years that say with Amazon, I don't recommend people get their supplements on Amazon because there are a lot of counterfeits. And we also don't know if it's coming from a third-party seller, how those supplements are being stored and handled. So I put this website together. I'm always adding things to it. We're going to be announcing on there later. This year is, well, actually coming up in the spring, we're going to have the Happy Vagina Rally, which is a 3-day virtual summit for all things pelvic health, so that you'll be able to find
when is it? When is it exactly?
that is the last weekend in March. So yeah. So I'm
Yeah, it's
very
so
excited about that.
exciting. Yeah, it is. I have to send my fertility clients there.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it should be great. So thank you so much for being here. I wish you a lot of luck for your upcoming summit, and see you again.
All right. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. Please subscribe to Pantea Kalhor Transition channel and order my book Naturally Conceived through Amazon. Thank you for watching.